All right, guys, thank you so much. We are going to be continuing our Seeing Through Gebser series today. I apologize for not getting you this video last week. Like I said, I'm a new father. I'm a little busy. Schedules changed with the baby. I have less time in a measurable sense, but, I still should have plenty of time to get it once a week. It's just every once in a while, sometimes, you got to make priorities and stuff. I also apologize. This video, I can already tell, is going to be super short. I do apologize about that, but I'm going to try to make it up to you by getting you another video this week. I cannot promise you that. And I do apologize if I don't. But I'm going to try to get another video this week as a sort of compensation for this week. I do apologize. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there. And thank you guys for continuing to watch, by the way. I mean, we're a trillion parts into the series. I can imagine some of you guys probably got bored and just dipped. And more power to you, by the way. So thank you guys so much. It really does, it means the world to me that you guys would continue. So, question is, I thought I remembered where I stopped off last time, but maybe I didn't. All right, so I'm just going to pick up where the last paragraph that I remember leaving off. I apologize if I already covered this. Maybe just skip ahead. I do apologize. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. T.S. Eliot has referred to Valerie's extreme self-consciousness. This encompasses a renunciation of the muses. There is the remarkable observation which Valery has made in his Politics of Spirit, that man, by creating time, has created an abuse. Time as a mental time, that is, of course. He gained perspectives, but at the cost of living henceforth only to the slightest degree in the present. In the same essay, he has written several lines earlier in concrete terms of the word spirit, with which he, quote, does not intend in any way to denote a metaphysical entity, unquote, but simply a, quote, power of transformation, unquote, whose efficacy is vastly different from that of natural forces. Oh, bless me, excuse me. Where did I step off? On the contrary, its efficacy lies in opposing or allying with one another the forces that are granted to us, from which, among other results, there is an increment of freedom. This is no longer a form of mental systematic thinking. Rather, it is the actualization of systatic elements, and their association with one another is the initial step toward syneretic perception of truth. Only someone who has overcome space and time is able to vanquish or overcome all that has become rigidified and unwound in space and time. This will aid in making comprehensible the following sentence of Valery. The composition or execution of the poem is the poem. All right, so I think we're picking up new. I apologize if we're not. So I think this should be new stuff. Quote, this transcending of what we call the three-dimensional, perspectival world into an aperspectival world, this withdrawing from the mentality of the muses into a diaphaneity of the most intense awareness is expressed in a remark of Valery, which T.S. Eliot found quite striking. In my opinion, the most authentic philosophy is not in the objects of reflection so much as in the very act of thought and its manipulation. Like I said in the last video, I realized maybe this isn't new. That's exactly what Gebser is doing. I mean, perfectly said. We're not talking about objects of reflection anymore. We're talking about thought itself. Is that not exactly what Gebser has done by assigning order to the pre-rational, to the irrational, to the rational, and, to a certain extent, the irrational? This is a clear renunciation of spatially fixed systemization in favor of what we have defined as Jesus Christ, man. Let me try again. I apologize. My God. This is a clear renunciation of spatially fixed systemization in favor of what we have defined as systasis. Remember, systasis is the conjoining of parts into an integral whole. It's similar to a reconciliation in the sense of you are making whole, but it is not. It is dissimilar to rational reconciliation insofar it is not doing it rationally, it is doing irrationally, which is to say they are conjoined by appealing to just reality straight as it is, rather than appealing to the laws of logic, the rules of rationality. We don't need to do that anymore. That's a waste of time. I've realized, by the way, that most based political, even this applies to both sides, by the way. I think most based political analysis comes from just, it sounds very simple, and it is, but just kind of looking at reality and describing it as it is, rather than imposing your conservative, liberal, anarcho-Bidenist, anarcho-Trumpist, syndicalist system onto reality itself in which you're ruining everything. No, just describe it. It is at the same time a negation of present-day philosophy in favor of etiology, which does not merely perceive objects in relation to objects, but perceives thinking itself, a detachment from the mental world without irrationalizing it, in contrast to Plato's praise of the muses of philosophy. That's a beautiful way of putting it. A detachment from the mental world without irrationalizing it. Oof, that is beautiful. But yeah, that's pretty much etiology, by the way. I don't know if I've mentioned this in other videos in this series. That is what Gebser predicts to replace philosophy. And yes, philosophy will be replaced. Just as mythology was replaced, the mythologemes were replaced by philosophemes. At the time, before the mental structure mutated, to suggest that mythologemes would go away would be it's blasphemous. Not only is it blasphemous, it's just unheard of. It's like saying if I drop my mouse, it's going to just float there. It's just not going to happen. I don't know what to say. So yes, unfortunately, philosophy, for all you philosophers out there, I think it will be replaced by etiology. Now, when this will happen, who knows? That I'm kind of hoping to speed up that process because it'll mitigate the damages of this state of transition we're in. But having said that, you never want to toss it. Just like you don't want to toss out mythology, doesn't mean you want to toss out all philosophy. Stupid, dumb. And the good news for all you philosophers out there, you don't have to be hanging onto your dad's coat knowing that he's going to go away to work and you're just going to be left there all alone. Now that Gebser is here, you can make this seamless transition from philosophy to etiology, and you will be way ahead of your philosopher peers. I apologize. The identical attitude shared by Mallarmé and Valery is also evident in T.S. Eliot's quote, "There is a great deal in the writing of poetry which must be conscious and deliberate. In fact, the bad poet is usually unconscious where he ought to be conscious, and conscious where he ought to be unconscious." So what he's doing here is, notice how he's not saying a good poet should be conscious when he's when he should be conscious, and he's unconscious when he should be unconscious. That's rational common sense. That's not what he's saying at all. He's not really doing it irrational either. He knows what he's talking about. He's conjoining. And in many ways, you're seeing the paradoxical switch from left to right that we talked about earlier in the series in this line by Eliot, right? Because conscious and unconscious, obviously, rationally, when it's time to be conscious, same thing with unconsciousness. But now there's a switch here. When you see this paradoxical stuff, again, it is not a sign of a regression into a deficient irrationalism. It is a sign of a progression. The scientists understand this better than the philosophers do. Oh, this is a really good stuff. Both errors tend to make him personal. That's treating being conscious when you should be. That line he just gave. Both errors tend to make him personal. Poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. It is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. But, of course, only those who have personality and emotions know what it means to want to escape from these things. Unquote. Now here's what Gebser says. Here again we find not a loss of ego in the poet as an instrument of the muses, but a growing above and beyond the mental ego to freedom from the ego, to that freedom which is the guarantor of the spiritual. So why do I put so much emphasis on the personal there? Remember, guys, anytime you get personal, individualism, individual uniqueness, anything like that, what does that signal? The strong subject. And the strong subject obviously comes from the mental structure. And the mental structure, that's where the muses belong to. So that he's turning loose of emotion and escaping emotion, that he's turning from personality and escaping personality and this sort of personal aspect, what does that say? What does that suggest? That we have transcended, hopefully at least, transcended to something else. Now, Gebser will go on to say it's not the personal. We don't give a damn about your ego, personal desires, wants, wishes. We don't care about that anymore. We care about the a-personal. Think of it like a Dostoevsky novel. Raskolnikov, and I won't pretend I've read this novel, Raskolnikov kills the accountant lady or the apartment manager, whatever her vocation was. This woman was terrible. She was exploitative. She was oppressive. She was tyrannical. She was rude. She had a bad soul. Very simple. Nonetheless, Raskolnikov learns that it does not matter how bad you think that person is because you have not sinned against a person. You have not sinned against an individual with unique, idiosyncratic, and personal aspects. You have sinned against the a-personal man, not a man, man. That is the switch that we are talking about here. So poetry and switching or I should say transcending the mere rational, individual, personal, muse aspect, now to essentially describing spiritual clarity. Poetry becomes a vessel or vehicle to communicate or transmit spiritual truths. In his poem of 10 years later, Little Gidding, 1942, T.S. Eliot composed verses which speak of the, quote, detachment from self and from things and from persons. And here he has said, unquote, quote, this is the use of memory for liberation. Ooh, interesting. In other words, he dissociates himself from the imprisonment by the muses and temporalizing memory. And in the same poem are these verses. The moment of the rose and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. A people without history is not redeemed from time, for history is a pattern of timeless moments. History is now. I was going to just kind of translate that for you, but let's let Gebser do it. These verses hardly require comment, but we ought to point out something implicit which is noted by the commentator of the poem, Raymond Preston. The 1,000 years of the yew, that's the yew tree, are qualitatively identical or equal to the hour of the rose. Time is not to be understood as measurable time or duration, but as, quote, quality and intensity, unquote, a conception that will no longer seem strange to us. How is it possible that 100 years, is that what it was? Yeah, 1,000 years of the yew tree, how is it possible that that is equal to the hour of the rose? It's not, at least not rationally, because rationally, of course, would say this is just is a measurable phenomena, a strictly measurable phenomena, and obviously, if you have 1,000 over 1, 1,000 is greater than 1, so the yew tree will obviously be superior. No, the hour, the intensity of positive qualities experienced and non-consciously lived out, if you will, or realized during that hour of the rose was qualitatively equivalent to 1,000 years of the yew tree, just as an hour with your loved ones is qualitatively equivalent to an entire week with your boss who you don't even like. 1 hour with your loved one is better. You will trade off the week for that 1 hour because the intensity and quality of that hour are so intense and so beneficial and so meaningful, yada, yada, yada. And there you go. Whereas poetry from antiquity... Ooh, this is so good. The way... I love Jean Gebser. The way he just breaks things down and the way he just describes in just one paragraph, one sentence, it's just a beautiful way. You can tell he's a genius. He knows what he's doing. What's that phrase? If you can't explain it simply, you don't really understand it. Jean Gebser understands it. Whereas poetry from antiquity until the Renaissance proceeded from the musing capabilities of the poet, the mental capacity of memory, the Platonic metachine, or participating in the timeless memory of the world, and the perpetual abundance, which was temporalized by the poets from Homer via Hesiod and Plato to Virgil and Dante, we find a renunciation of this type of creativity after the French Revolution, beginning with Novalis, that becomes increasingly and pervasively conscious in its expression. The quote-unquote new obligation gradually enters consciousness. It is no longer an obligation of ordering the soul and thinking of the muses. That's what the muses does, is orders the soul and allows it to be transmitted into poetry, this sort of mental aspect. It is, as Andre Gide emphasizes, an obligation which belongs, quote, to the order of the spirit, unquote. That is a key point. One thing that it is a non-negotiable, that irrational, integral consciousness must incorporate spirituality. There is no getting around it. There simply is no getting around it. It would be like trying to be rational without space. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The source of creative power in man changes in proportion to the intensity of incursion of the new mutation, and this source shifts from the mental to the incipient integral structure of consciousness. Beautiful. We shall have to concede that this renunciation is not a problem of generations, as though the attitude of Novalis or Holderlin were mere swings of the pendulum from the attitudes of the preceding generation to their own. So what it is not, this switch from 3D rational to 4D irrational, it is not just my grandparents grew up as hippies, now I'm going to become super button-up, right-wing trad, and I'm going to have kids, and they're going to rebel against that, and they're going to become hippies again, or they're going to become, I don't know, like socialists, and then they're going to have kids and become libertarians. It's not got nothing to do with that. This is not so. In the course of the last several generations, the renunciation or rejection has consolidated itself and gained in strength. As long as this fundamental change was not perceived, Novalis could be put aside as a magic poet, since his irrationality could not be perceived as such, and Holderlin could be branded as a mythical poet, although he had himself formulated the preeminent statement against myth. I'll finish this. Mallarmé, if that's how you're pronouncing it, by the way, I apologize, could be considered quote-unquote obscure, despite his supraluminescence, and Valery accused of intellectualism despite his irrational endeavors. So, what's the lesson here? If you've ever argued with a rationalist, you will become intimately aware of this fact. You are giving them irrationality. They cannot conceive of that. They can conceive of irrationality, even if poorly, and even pre-rationality, even if poorly. They can't give you this magical stuff. They can't give you the 2D flat circle. Nonetheless, they have a vague idea of what it is. They will put you in that box, just like they put Holderlin in the box, just like they put Guide, or whatever his name is, in the box, or Novalis. Not good. The constancy of the motif of the supplanting of the muses by the spiritual... Oh, hold on. What the heck? By the spiritual and... There we go. By the spiritual and the supplanting of the temporalized by the time free will now be apparent from the cited examples. So there you go. Listen to this. It is perhaps not so much a question of mere constancy as one of the clarification and more conscious formulation of this motif, as in the case of the urbane yet convincing statement by Aldous Huxley in his book Time Must Have a Stop. Listen to this. The great thing about Gebser is you can tell he doesn't have an ego, because if he did, he wouldn't be quoting all these other people who also have this irrational integral stuff. Especially when we get into the sciences, some of these guys he quotes, man, these guys they've got it. they have got it. But listen to this. Listen to how beautiful this summation by Aldous Huxley is. I mean, my God, what a mind. Quote, listen to this. For the 9 muses are the daughters of Mnemosyne. Remember, we talked about this. Memory is of the very stuff and substance of poetry. And poetry, of course, is the best that human life can offer. But there is also the life of the spirit, and the life of spirit is the analog on a higher turn of the spiritual of the animal's life. The progression is from animal eternity into time, into the strictly human world of memory and anticipation, and from time, if one chooses to go on, into the world of spiritual eternity, into the divine ground. Now, of course, when he says time, he's referencing mental time, that is. The life of spirit is life exclusively in the present. So now we're seeing how we're transcending the mental time, no more past, future, and present. That's all integrated into a perpetual present. The life of spirit is life exclusively in the present, never in the past or future. Life here, now, not life looked forward to or recollected. There's absolutely no room in it for pathos or remorse or a voluptuous rumination of the delicious cuds of 30 years ago. Its intelligible light has nothing whatever to do either with the sunset radiance of those heart-rendingly good old days before the last war, but 3, or with the neon glow from the technological New Jerusalems beyond the horizons of the next revolution. No, the life of the Spirit is life out of time, life in its essence and eternal principle, which is why they all insist, all the people best qualified to know, that memory must be lived down and finally died to. When one has succeeded in mortifying the memory, says John of the Cross, one is in a state that is only a degree less perfect and profitable than the state of union with God. It is an assertion that, at a first reading, I found incomprehensible. But that was because, at that time, and my first concern was with the life of poetry, not of the spirit. Now I know, by humiliating experience, all that memory can do to darken and obstruct the knowledge of the eternal ground. How beautiful is that, huh? And that, actually, will be where we end today. Again, I do apologize for having such a short video today. I will try really, really hard. I cannot make promises, but I will try to give you guys another video later this week. If you're interested, I just put out a Seeing the World integrally video about whether Kant was a rationalist or not. I had a lot of fun. It was a little more formal, a little less organized, but still fun. Had some cool discussion, at least I hope. And also, what else? Oh, and I put on my Substack a review of one of my new favorite films of all time, Wild Strawberries. It is an anti-rationalist masterpiece. Anti-rationalist masterpiece. Even better than like The Seventh Seal or something like that. I prefer it. So good. Such a great movie. It's on HBO Max. If you have that, please go watch it. Especially if you enjoy this Gebser stuff, you will be able to pick apart this, like, oh, there it is. There it is. And it talks about everything. It talks about the Faustian myth of deed and death. It gets into that. It gets into just the problems of rationalism, and it gets into time as an intensity, even though it doesn't quite consciously realize it. Very, very fascinating. Just a great movie. Go watch it. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Love you.